No, it's okay again. I try not to, when I do these things, point out and single out individual actions that cause failures, because ultimately it's a team game, and if one person makes a mistake, you have plenty of other people to help pull them out of that mistake, right? So it's when you have multiple mistakes happen in a row, or preparation wasn't made properly, that you have, problems. So, like with the others that I've done, that's how I will be focusing on this one. As a analysis of what went wrong fundamentally with the battle. I'm not going to waste time saying any of the wouldas, couldas, shouldas of what actions people should have taken. Yeah. So, this will mostly focus on, like, you could have done this differently. More of, here's how I analyzed how things were going, both during and after the fact. Hi, Maji. And then we will see, well, like, we already know the consequences of those things not being accounted for. Alright? Plenty of people made mistakes during this, myself included. I'll get into that, and part of that is going to be from the preparation standpoint, Tolka. I just want to give a little time for anyone who wants to be here for this, to be here for this. That's what we could do. So, for anyone who somehow doesn't know who's here, who isn't part of the participating in the Angel Sword TTRPG game, this is I guess you would call it like a beta in development TTRPG system, created by a group of developers who have played a plethora of different TTRPGs in the past, and have essentially knuckled down saying, well, we're constantly modifying the games that we already play to fit our aesthetic and what we want to be able to do, so why don't we just do it ourselves? And then you have this. The crux of it boils down to, they've always been kind of dissatisfied with combat. If you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinders, you will know the kind of like checkout combat that those promote, where you take your turn, and the only interactions you will ever have outside of your turn is the DM going, hey, what's your armor class? Or, hey, make a save. And then you're checked out the entire time. You're completely passive outside of your turn. There's nothing really you can do outside of a very small select set of circumstances. The opposite is true in Angel Sword TTRPG. You have to be aware of the entire combat. You have so many tools at your disposal to act during other people's turns, to save yourselves, to save the others, to interrupt things, all sorts of things. So the base combat is significantly more tactical in terms of its play. Because of that, passivity and tactical failures stack up very aggressively when you do them. So, yeah. Going back to Angel Sword TTRPG, Lyrian Chronicles is the setting. It is a 100% online online RPG. Let me, there's the link. So many classes that boil down to not so much like I'm gonna be in this class, this is my entire identity forever. More of they are classes with a handful of abilities that focus on their identity, and your intent is to build into multiple classes to finalize how you want to approach the game world. Yeah, and I've done a much longer than I intended video on character creation and the way that I go about doing it. So that's on the Angel Sword TTRPG YouTube. That I don't have a link to. Well, let me find it. I know what I'm doing. There we go. Yeah, it's growing pains, exactly. Alright. To start off with, I will be 100% upfront and frank with this, in terms of my own participation and knowledge leading up to this Dragonclaw Alliance main camp assault. This was the culminating event of a blockade on resources to the town of Moraine, where the adventurers that were left behind in Moraine gathered together to break the blockade. This involved attacking multiple subcamps, taking out an artillery park, and finally the main assault on the leadership of the Dragonclaw Alliance. There were scouting missions to ascertain the location of the subcamps, which did identify the subcamps, but they didn't identify some key aspects, and that goes into the preparation part of this. I was also not involved, and I kept myself purposefully uninvolved in the planning in the war room for the main camp assault, because my character was literally not in town. She was out on expedition, and they knew about her timing to come back, so they included her in the main camp assault, knowing that she has very good damage and area of effect capabilities. So they knew they needed that. So I purposefully did not involve myself in the planning whatsoever to keep myself removed and not tempted to backseat when I'm not actually there. So, planning is where this thing fell apart initially. Everything about what went wrong boils down to the pre-moments of the fight, of the build-up to it, and the not sticking to the initial loose plan and making an ad hoc plan rapidly on site that wasn't fully agreed upon, but we were like, fuck it, let's go. So, first failure point, the scouts. They were afraid of taking the risk of being detected at all, and did only identifying location scouting. So they found the subcamps they were intended to find, they located the main camp, but because they were unwilling to take any unnecessary risks in their eyes, they did not stick around to identify members, they did not stick around to ID any newcomers, and they did not, most importantly, find the artillery park. The artillery park was found by accident by a backup group that was holding a blockade on the road. And they were able to thankfully take out the artillery so it wouldn't influence the main camp assault. But no long-term surveillance was placed on the main camp to identify leadership and how things were being run, times between the camp and back for patrols, anyone knew, for example, the Hera cultists that were apparently that the DCA was working with. We didn't know about any of that, right? So, last thing you want is when you go into the hardest, like, power level-wise fight, is to have surprises, which is what we had. So let me bring up the first image where things went sideways. Oop. Make this a little bigger. Move me on top of all of these. There we go. Alright. So, here we have the initial starting point for our team at the main camp, right? So you can see we're kind of scattered across this road leading up, and I'll get some images of what we had to deal with above. And in fact, this image shows a kind of like we're even more concentrated at the start of this fight with Gen and Dogbert joining the left side completely instead of being up the middle. This was done because let me take a look at my images. There we go. This is a relatively okay image. This was done. Ignore the big giant monster, that's not here yet. This was done because they saw that the enemy was, when we arrived, we saw that the enemy was kind of split up on either side of the road. Now, as far as I'm able to tell, the original plan was for the entire group to be together and push forward under wall cover from Fuyuka. She could make very tough, full cover walls that would completely eliminate all range attacks against us. And the plan was, as far as I could tell, originally, was to use a wall, move up to it, take out any melee fighters that approached while avoiding range attacks. Once that was clear, push the wall forward again, move up to it until we could engage the range attackers safely. That was the plan. But once it was seen that the enemy was split, the plan suddenly, and for reasons I can't tell, became, let's have one group take the left side of the map, one group take the right side of the map, and then we'll advance. So the major problem here becomes the right side of the group has Fuyuka, the wall maker. The left side of the group does not. They have no way of providing cover for themselves other than the rocks, which is why you see us kind of clustered around rocks at the start, because we know we have to hide from the snipers. This on top of not anticipating a third party acting with the DCA is the primary failure point of the fight. In no uncertain terms, we split the party. We didn't focus our firepower. Anyone who tried to push us out from behind the walls, if they did, would have just completely been eradicated by the sheer amount of actions we would have to deal with them. And I always feel like I'm beating a dead horse with this, but success and failure in Angel Sword TTRPG in a fight comes down to action economy, managing your own and the enemies. So, I go back to this one here. We have how many enemies on screen right now? Oh, one's already dead on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? We have 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. We have 12. We have 12 enemies on the field versus our 10. 4 of them, from the get-go, we know for sure are grunts. That would be the crystal-bearing cultists. They're grunts. We know this because many of them got exhausted on our opening maneuver, which was a wide-scale AoE. So we already knew. These magical crystals by the wall weren't there initially. They were a secret art done by the lieutenant of the DCA. If I can. I don't know. You can't see it because it's behind everything. Never mind. But yeah. 12 versus 10. But 4 of them were grunts. A big surprise, and why I said the Hera cultists were a big surprise, is upon killing one of the cultist grunts, he summoned a fiend. This fiend moved quickly to engage all but one of the left side team that has been split. Right? On top of this, the leader of the Hera cultists, a heroic unit, had the ability to pull, we wouldn't know this, obviously, had the ability to pull one of our members out and lock them into melee combat with her. Oh, okay, Mordana. So, you expected to be essentially fighting 2 fights side by side with 2 different DMs, not 1 mega fight. I see. Well, once that's all well and good, but once you're put all on the same map with both DMs in the same call, pretty good to assume that it's going to be 1 big fight. So, by the end of the first couple turns, we have the leader, Jay, of left group, has been pulled and locked in place by the enemy Hera cultist leader. The rest of team left is occupied by a giant fiend blocking our path. Luckily, a nature man. Luckily, Taravel, our pixie healer, was able to use his fairy light eyes to essentially stun lock this fiend the entire fight. But not before it did some damage. And it didn't do any damage in itself in terms of it made attacks, it just moved up to us. What it did is it had revenge attacks. So every time it was hit by anyone, it would revenge hit someone in melee range. And it had a lot of focus and a lot of power to do it. So, this comes down to analyzing the enemies. Obviously, we don't know what this fiend would do. We wouldn't know. But the first hit on it, where it does an automatic revenge, understandable. We don't know what it does. We're just hoping we can clear it because we're pretty sure a grunt summon it's probably a grunt summon. Right. So, first hit does revenge. Okay. Maybe it spends one of its actions is always going to be a revenge hit against someone. We can help mitigate that with having a tank be in close proximity to eat it. Second attack hits it, it revenges again. Now this tells you, if you know the game system, he has rapid on revenge. That means you stop attacking him immediately, because he's always going to get 1-to-1 attacks, and his attacks hit more often and hit harder. It's not worth the trade. They hit him a 3rd time. I don't know why. They hit him a 3rd time, and before they figure out we need to ignore him, and Taravel stuns him. While this is happening, we have to move up to support Jay, because if we don't, he dies. Period. He's the closest target. He's got literally 3 snipers looking at him, plus 2 mages, plus an alchemist, plus the 2 leaders are close to him. Like, everything's gonna go wrong for Jay in a second. Now, he got pulled because he had a high initiative, and he moved up, which is what he was supposed to do. He couldn't have expected someone to have a giant pull to pull him in. Understandable. Yeah, the mark of injustice prevents movement, so that's why he couldn't leave. He couldn't disengage. Now, we're back to the preparation part. We all had prayers for us. Yep, it's just, you gotta learn. You gotta learn, Gen. This is learning experience. So he couldn't move away. He's a ranged combatant, and he couldn't move away. But, in preparation to this, for the players who had no ability to go on this assault, for whatever reason, a special event was held to pray for this attack. And if you did so, you got to choose one of your abilities that one of us would be able to use using our own resources. One of the abilities was Lay on Hands. Lay on Hands has the ability that if you use it, it not only heals you, but if you spend a little bit more mana, it removes all negative status effects, including Marks of Injustice. Now, does that require you to kind of understand what it is your resources are? Yes, but we had the resources available to us, and looking through them is like, Jay was one of the leaders, Fuyuka was one of the leaders. Both of those two, at the very minimum, should have understood what our list of bonus abilities do and what they could have been used for. But they really didn't start getting used until the fight had really turned against us. So, again, failure in preparation is there. We had a list of these abilities. We didn't understand what the abilities did as a whole. Thus, we didn't use them correctly. This leads to more. You can see that right team here carries out with their plan and pushes up to engage, to try to push the wall, essentially. While I've moved up to help give range support to Jay, and on their turns, again, Dogbert and Terraville will also move up. Fuyuka and Finia are hiding behind an ice wall to prevent sniper fire as planned. Finia being the right side healer. But we have 3 of our melee combatants are off hiding behind rocks and get pounced on by the enemy leadership. They smoke to prevent any range attacks from interrupting them. However, Kremen Lodi, the enemy leader, is a melee AoE specialized Highlander. Hey guys, welcome. So his entire shtick is to get as close to as many people as possible and use his secret art. Now, we couldn't possibly be expected to know what his secret art is if we hadn't encountered him before, but we have. A previous party, the one that sparked this entire incident, already encountered his secret art. I didn't see anything in any briefings or planning to account for the fact that this man should not be attacked while turtled. You need movement to deal with him, because he burns mana keeping that secret art running, so as you move away, you just waste his time. He either has to drop it and he no longer has a secret art, or he moves. I mean, she's a bodyguard. Regardless of if you expected it or not, her turn cycle fell directly after his, or she could have made it fall directly after his with a delay, and it would have been the same thing, where she would always follow him up. So, expecting the bodyguard to follow her bodyguard target is prudent. And again, we're learning how this system works every fight, right? Many people assumed that a prepare action could only prepare for 1 AP or 1 ability use. So if it's a 2 AP heavy attack, you can do that. The prepare actions, exactly Emperor Xanander. But if you need to pay attention to how at least how Leaflet will do her DMing. If an enemy uses a secret art, she announces that it's a secret art. Right? So, well, no one expected him to... I expected him to bounce that way. You had unopposed motion up the right side. That was going to interfere with his ranged units. Why wouldn't he move to intercept that while the left side was also intercepted? So, I expected one of two things of him. Either he was going to force the issue on the left side and clear us and push us back, or he was going to engage the right side. And the more I learned about Kremen, the more I understand he would go. But, yes. We had knowledge of both his and Alison, her, the lieutenants. We had both of their secret arts. They were previously used in a fight before this. And a majority of that team, and that team lived. They could have definitely told us about it. Well, that comes with an understanding of powerful abilities always cost MP. Especially powerful secret arts. And if they're continuous, they almost always have upkeep. We couldn't know for sure that he had a time limit on it, based on MP, but we could infer, based on how most abilities work. So, yeah, so we have, right now we have the party is split even more. With Fuyuka and Finia, here we're attempting to give fire support. Smoke goes down, they can't do anything. This is going to be a reoccurring theme of cutting a line of sight on your ranged DPS in order to save yourself from ranged DPS from the enemy. Right? So here we have next slide, please. We're going to focus back on the left side here. And on the left side, this is before Dogbert and Terraville come up here, because they're bottom of the initiative. A smoke goes out again on this side. This was to prevent fire coming in from the ranged targets, while they could focus down Malus. Understandable. This was a play. However, what this did is, right now, Nia can't shoot Malus until, I think it's Gen who dropped it. I don't know whose turn it was. Whoever's turn it was, Nia was really high on the initiative, but Gen dropped the smoke because, well, Jay was going to go down to sniper fire. He needed to be protected. So the one thing here that's common with the smokes that are used is, yep, you're don't feel sad when you do something someone tells you to do with your equipment and you agree to it. Don't feel bad. But so two things. We were provided smokes from Query, and I was told this later after the fight that the smokes at a second stage, because they were pressurized, because they were made special for her. So this one should have been even bigger than it was, and would need to be, could have been thrown at an angle away from the melee to block all the sniper's view, which would allow your ranged attackers to hit the melee combatants. So you don't have to throw smokes on top of you. you can throw them off-center to block line of sight. And knowing that those smokes were supposed to be bigger, you could have literally put Malus at the edge of the smoke bubble and still block the sniper's complete line of sight, right? Which would allow all of your ranged DPS to continue focusing on Malus. And to be honest, if we had a couple more hits on her from any other DPS, she wouldn't have been a problem, right? So, but because we didn't, we couldn't do that. So, smoke use and how it was used. Use your smokes, they're very good, very big bang for your buck, but know how to use them. Use them to cut off line of sight, more than cut off your own line of sight, especially if you have ranged units that need to support you. Next PNG. And as you can see here, I tried to capture a look of the snipers and how this would have worked. So you had all of these, so we had these two mages at the rocks, we had 3 snipers up in the tower, and the larger smoke that would have been able to center with Malus at the edge would have had the same effect as the little smoke, but allowed anyone who could see Malus to fire at her, right? So it's a use case thing. We will learn. We will learn. Oop, please. Please. Thank you. Next. And now, poor Dogbert. Poor Dogbert rushes up the road to try to support his friends, mismanages his movement because everyone's packed in, and is left outside the smoke. Yep. Again, I'm not trying to single out, like, individual people's mistakes. I'm pointing out the flow of how the combat went, and the consequences of that. What do you think the consequences of Dogbert being the only target of the snipers? The consequences being Dogbert's RP and HP get completely ruined. And this is an ultimate reality of why he goes down at the end. Because he couldn't defend against 8 AP of light attacks and 2 AP of heavy attacks. So he literally just got ripped to shreds. On top of that, he had the mages and the alchemists to engage him as well. So I know his rush was to engage Malus in combat, but knowing you don't have the movement to get in the smoke from that side, take the moment to make sure you're covered by it still. Head around the back, get in there next turn, because losing your resources, well, it's the same thing. You can't DPS if you're dead, right? Lose some uptime, you miss out on some DPS. If you're dead, you lose out on all your DPS. Okay. I don't remember when the Sanctuary went down, but that was like, so the order here goes, we had a smoke bomb go off, cutting line of sight for a turn, then a Sanctuary went off, cutting a line of sight for range attackers for a turn. Right? So eventually, things aren't going well for the left team, and they send over Finia to help. She does the Sanctuary, she is shielding like a madwoman, healing like a madwoman. We're pretty much out of defensive resources at this point, and the enemy are moving closer to support. At the same time, the right side group pulls back to enact a plan to trap Kremen, the leader. It was a lot. They used a lot of resources to trap him. A very clever pit trap plan, but for the amount of resources that they used, they could have just punched him in the face. Right? I know he had a bodyguard who would have redirected a lot of the damage, but if you redirect the damage to the bodyguard, then the bodyguard goes down, and now you're down one heroic party member anyway. And now Kremen has no defenses. So, using... one of them is going down if you just focused him, right? But his problem was, he was still spinning. He was still in his secret art. So clustering is still the suboptimal thing to do with him. He is constantly throwing a free heavy attack every round against everyone who starts next to him. That's huge, right? And regardless of if they knew about it beforehand or not, they know about it now, what he's doing. So, adjusting your strategy, using the walls to break line of sight with the snipers, to be able to kite him in multiple directions so he isn't hitting one character or multiple characters for free. I think at some point he was getting something like 8 free AP of heavy attacks every round. For at least one round. Because he was hitting that many people with his spin. And that's a lot. Finia came over to help us because if we could bring down Malus, that would allow our team to either collapse back into Kremen, or it would allow our team to push forward and suppress the snipers, which would allow the other team to maneuver more freely while dealing with Kremen. So, our current plan then became focus Malus, send her down, but she had a lot of support behind her. Pretty much 3/4 of the team of the enemy was supporting her not going down, because she was the linchpin on the left side. If she fell, the left side fell. And they knew that, so they were supporting her like crazy. All this time, the big scary monster in the bottom, he's been perma-stunned by Terraville, which was great. I think Fuyuka also had an ability that could have one-shot the big scary guy, but she was using a lot of her MP for walls. So having Terraville, who wasn't really using his lock up the big scary monster, was a good play. And yeah, Neko, we lost a lot of RP, just being too exposed. And then the trap. The trap goes off. Very clever, but the amount of resources used to pull it off, I don't think made it worth it. If they had been able to open with this, like, they moved up, he moved in, prepared actions went off, he was in the hole before he could even react, that would have been a good use of resources. But they had to go out, spend resources, come back, spend resources. Asuchi Bandit. And they did get him in the hole. They maneuvered him correctly, they got him in the hole, lots of D&D arguments were held over how the walls could be formed, he was trapped in there, and then on his turn, he was still spinning, and he jumped straight out, tore through the wall because he could do a lot of damage, and then continued doing damage. It's at this point that on the left side, we fired off the glitter shards that we had in storage, which was immediately countered by essentially a modified Dispel Magic, so that was fun. I kind of should have expected that their mage that wasn't really doing much was just waiting to do dispels, was an anti-caster of some sort, but we were more concerned with keeping people up above a certain health threshold to prevent Malus from insta-killing them. And again, this is at this point when Kremen escapes his attack, the glitter shards get stolen, that we all knew, okay, game's up, we've spent too many resources for too little gain, we gotta run. This is when the retreat happened, which was pretty ad hoc. Essentially, people with the highest initiative booked it. Some people were down, and we carried them out with Hatch, which halved our move speed, but it worked out okay. Unfortunately, Terraville was at the bottom of the initiative, and so he was kind of left behind, with the assumption that if he was in someone's occupied space, like an ally's, he would go with them, and that was already established previously that that's not how it worked. So Terraville got left behind, but pretty much the entire enemy team got to go before he could run away, and he was ultimately killed by Malus. We almost got everyone out. Dogbert was taken prisoner. Dawn was almost taken prisoner, but some RP things got him out of it. So we essentially lost 2 of our 10 strong party as casualties. The enemy lost 2 grunts as their casualties. And yeah, we were forced to retreat back to Moraine. However, even though the main camp was ultimately a failure, we weren't able to take down the leadership or capture any of them really. The Dragon's Claw Alliance was gutted by the other operations in the area, so they were relying on these sub-camps and the artillery to be able to lock down the pass. And what the other groups did was succeed on taking out a majority of the rest of the Dragon's Claw Alliance, either through killing them or capturing them. So they won't be able to hold the pass anymore. And we'll likely see some form of restructuring or them retreating or moving away to do their own thing. I think we had a prisoner exchange last night. That the diplomacy didn't go too terribly well. But, yeah. So, while the fight failed, the event itself, I think, is a success. We'll have to see how it goes. Well, it's not a GM save, Tulka. It's more of a GM not punishing 3/4 of the players who succeeded because one fight failed. Right? Kind of unfair to punish everyone who did really well when one group failed. Especially in the circumstances when you tally it all up. So yeah. The first round of combat was very decisive, yes. It didn't need to be, but we were only in the situation where it became decisive due to a rapid change of plans at the beginning of the fight to go from one condensed group of 10 to 2 groups of 5, and a failure to manage action economy versus an enemy. So, because ultimately, left team was facing probably 60 to 70% of all enemy AP being used, because we were the targets that they could hit, right? Because the other team had nice walls, which is the whole plan, was to hide behind nice walls. This should have allowed right team to have superior action economy against the enemy core, but Kremen offset this with his AoEs. So again, they were playing at an AP deficit of action economy versus the enemy. So, like with many fights in Angel Sword TTRPG, the most deciding factor is who has more resources, more action points, more reaction points, more MP collectively in their group versus the other. You can offset this with clever tactics, but those clever tactics almost always amount to how do you prevent the enemy from maximizing their use of their resources? Like the walls, like moving away from somebody who has free attacks on an AoE, that kind of stuff. Or, in the terms of this giant monster, which we did right, locking him down so he can't throw free attacks at everybody. Makes sense? Any questions? Again, I'm trying desperately not to point out direct, distinct failures to act on individual players and characters, because ultimately that matters less than the overall encounter was planned for and played poorly due to a various amount of circumstances. Well, with the main analysis over, if anyone is here who was in this fight, or if anyone else is curious about anyone else's role, I can give my opinion. Exactly, Quebec. Sometimes you make a mistake, sometimes the dice fail, and you reap the consequences, and it's how you recover from those consequences that take the day. Alright. So, Finia, let's start with Gen. I think he was asking for opinions first. And by start with Gen, I mean start with water. Yeah, Dogbert getting caught out in the open was pretty horrendous. So I saw a lot of talk during the actual game where our split initiative with the enemy, we had a lot of people going first and a lot of people going last, and the enemy was kind of bunched up in the middle, right? Like, that caused some of our problems, which only for the first round. After that, it kind of normalizes, where we all essentially went in a row, and then the enemy all went in a row. But with Gen, your primary mistake, again, was engaging in that third revenge strike against the Fiend. We'd already seen what happened when people attacked it 2 times. We knew it was going to keep doing it because it wouldn't have been able to do it a second time anyway. So not only did you take essentially free damage, reducing some of your resources, you spent AP that could have been used traveling up to the main fight. Right? Either fight. You could have gone right, you could have gone left, you could have gone to either side to help clear it out. Obviously, well, not you specifically, but RP and HP was spent due to your actions. It's a collective. Assume everyone's HP and RP is all like one unit, right? It's your collective use of that is your action economy for the group. So you have to be mindful of if your actions cause another player to take damage or spend RP, that can also be bad. So just, again, it's this game is significantly more interactive in terms of what's happening not to your character than most others. So you decided to move up and help support, right? So that's not a bad plan. Your initial bad plan was taking that last shot at the Fiend, hoping you could do something to it. And then you lost out on some movement to get up to Malus. You caused a loss of HP and RP. And after that, you were doing what you could. What the dice could allow you to do. You were in melee with the enemy, doing what you could. I mean, you just gotta land your hits. You could have instead moved beyond Malus and harassed the alchemist that was coming at us. You could have moved forward to harass the mages, or even got up to the snipers. Essentially trusting the rest of your team to handle one boss lady. And honestly, without mages and snipers hitting us in the back, we probably could have split off Nia and Gen to go harass the enemy. If I could have done anything differently, I would have insisted we not split. And that we move forward with the wall plan. The second thing I would have done differently, and this is kind of cold, and not something me as a player considered, but I couldn't have Nia do it, is not go rescue Jay. Let him tank Malus. Right? Not move up, just focus firepower on anything that came within range. Whatever. Instead, I moved up to help make a target of myself to provide more buffer in terms of HP and RP away from Jay. I could have stayed at the base and just blasted at Malus, made no attempt to get any closer, and that probably would have been a better play for me, because I would have been in position to then support Kremen when he came down, or support against Kremen when Malus was blocked from my sight. So, the Hexes didn't really do much to break the planning. It was just making AoEs a little bit harder to center. So that's why we switched back to squares. Yeah. So, if I had to do a cold-hearted plan with a cold-hearted sniper character, I would have left Jay to his own devices and either tried to suppress his attacker or suppress the others around him. If I had to do things differently. That would have left Nia in position to support the right team as well as the left team. Because she was invited to this camp because she has high damage and AoEs. So yeah. The call to save Jay was made, so we acted on it. But coldly, not saving Jay probably would have saved the fight. We still would have lost the character because Malus absolutely would have killed him as soon as he went down. But we would have been able to burn down Malus from safety. What else? Phinia, you did the best you could with what you were told to do. You were essentially the reserve support for your team, and moving over to help the struggling side because you're catfolk and you can, made sense at the time. If the goal was to continue pushing as we were. We had two squad leaders. We had Jay Spicer, who was squad leading left team, and Fuyuka, who was squad leading right team. Apparently this was done initially because the expectation was there were going to be two separate fights with two different DMs, each running a five-man mission. Instead, what they got was a full 10-man mission with both DMs running things simultaneously. So it was a miscommunication or a misunderstanding there, but that doesn't hold 100% water because they already had plans in place, assuming it was a full 10-man. So the whole wall strategy thing was already a thing, and the plans changed at the mission start when they saw the layout of the map. So, So this is tricky. It's like saying, what would you do differently? I had many things that I wanted to do differently, but I have been very respectful of my character's own behavior and what she would be willing to do and how far she's willing to step up and what threshold she has when she will go outside of her comfort zone. Toward the end of the session, I was having Nia be significantly more on point with telling people what to do because they were in an emergency situation and they needed to leave. Right? So she was working desperately to get people on track to get out. The left side leader was already down, so there was no one to contradict her. So that was the breaking point for her character, where it would allow me to put more and more of my tactical analysis into play. So I definitely try to do that at all times, which is, again, why I wasn't involved in the war room planning, because I physically wasn't there, and I know the idea was like, well, you can kind of like fudge it. The like time in Moraine is kind of weird. Like, I could have been there if I wanted to, but I felt like, no, I'm just gonna, she's gonna go, and I'm hoping that they will come up with a good plan, and they will present the plan, and then we can discuss the plan ultimately before we go, which didn't happen. We just kind of like, you're going here with this person. I'm like, okay. And then that was just, yeah. So the extent of the understanding of the plan was, you're assigned to this squad. He's your team leader. And I got nothing of the overall plan until we were actively engaged. So, yeah. Many things led to this. Planning was the primary failure point, and because planning failed, we were at action economy deficit the whole fight. And because we were at action economy deficit, our resources got used up more than their resources, which means we had to run. I mean, it's as simple as, even though it didn't feel that simple at the time. So, let this be a lesson. Make sure everyone knows what the plan is. If you don't agree with the plan, you should probably speak up with not just I don't agrees, but don't give a question, give a solution as to why you think is bad and what could be fixed about it. Yeah, like Finia, Dawn, freaking Nia, all were like full in character. Finia's action assessment was good. Like, she did exactly what she was supposed to do, what she was told to do. She went from supporting her side to engaging and supporting the second side because they saw that was failing. With the understanding of, if left team fell, nothing could save right team. No one was getting away, right? So, propping up left team, when it looked like right team had things under control with a plan to control Kremen, the right call. Saving your resources for shields, heals, and support, good calls. You really didn't do much wrong. Like, don't cluster when someone's spinning to win. I think that's a big thing. But no, it worked out. It worked out as well as it could. With how things developed. And the fact that we got 8 out of the 10 people out of there is nothing short of a miracle. Honestly, I was expecting the left team to mostly be captured or killed. Like, halfway through the fight. Because we were taking hits, and we were out of cover. So, Yeah. Yep. Should have run sooner. Probably. Honestly speaking, we wouldn't even had to run if we had on the left side, if we had just decided to retreat back in good order, back towards the starter area, out of range of a majority of the snipers, which would force the snipers to come down, which would give us a turn free of being sniped, which would allow us a turn free to burn Malus or Kremen. So we could have retreated without doing a full retreat, just moving back to original positions. This would have allowed us to join forces with right team and allow us to more heavily focus things down, forcing the enemy to use their AP to move instead of attack us. Again, it's the action economy thing. Hey, Arya. It's the action economy thing, right? So by forcing them to move to us, they're not hitting us. They're not using our resources. We have less distance to move before we can do things. So we could literally move half of our AP, blast the crap out of Malus as we're going. They still have to move down to come get us. If the enemy waited in position where they were safe, we would have been able to pick them off at our leisure. Or start enacting our own plan of walling ourselves forward with cover. So it would have allowed us to regroup, reconstitute, and like re-engage on our own terms. So retreating, but not full retreating, as soon as Jay was unmarked, we should have pulled back instead of trying to slug it out with Malus within range of the snipers. If I had to choose one turning point moment, that turning point would have been left team moves up to free Jay. Once Jay is free, left team moves back to consolidate with the right team. Would have been the play, I think. Might not have 100% saved it, but we would have done so much more damage to the enemy as they tried to close on us. We definitely would have taken 1 or 2 heroics down before we were forced to run. So, yep. Planning wise for this one, as soon as they realized it was going to be one big fight with 10 adventurers, they should have decided amongst themselves who was the actual party leader. Like, none of this Fuyuka's leading one, Jay's leading the other. Have Jay and Fuyu hash it out, one of them becomes the leader. We are talking about a TTRPG session that we lost. The Angel Sword Studio TTRPG, let me is Windows is an online TTRPG made by a group of devs that really liked every TTRPG, so they decided to make their own. We almost had a full party wipe. We managed to escape with only 1 death and 1 person captured, who we would later then prisoner exchange for. This was an event called the Moraine Living World campaign, where it's essentially an MMO, but in TTRPG format, where we have a group of player characters who are all in this expedition mode in a frontier town, and we're going into a dangerous magical radiation land, to, like, study it, find lost artifacts, gain in power, just be on the fringes of society and exploring. That fight that I was analyzing was the culmination of an altercation we had with a NPC group earlier. There was some miscommunication and a fight broke out over some treasure, which caused this NPC group to get mad at all of the player characters, so they left and barricaded the supply lines to the valley, so we had to go in and clear them out, so we didn't all starve to death. Most of the clearing out happened in the little side camps, but that was the main camp assault, which we kind of failed due to a lack of scouting knowledge and poor planning. And we managed to extract with 8 of the 10 adventurers who went in. One of those adventurers who didn't leave died. One was captured. I guess 2 were captured, but 1 was released immediately. The other was captured and was released later. So, like a 10% casualty rate, essentially, from that fight.